Hello, this is your buddy George Jones over in the gun room. We're going to talk about knives a little bit more. I've made 2 or 3 videos concerning the knife collection, the hunting knife collection, the pocket knife collection, and so forth. Everybody that knows me knows I'm involved in World War II modern military reenacting. Uh, World War II reenacting started in the 1960s when military vehicle collecting started taking off. You know, guy pull an old Jeep out, old William B. Jeep, and he'd pull it out of a barn someplace covered with chicken poop, and he'd go to working on it and fix it up and restore it. You know, the next thing you know, they started showing up in parades real big. And then the next thing you know, guys started showing up in uniform for parades with restored military vehicles. And it wasn't long till guys started showing up in German restored military vehicles and started showing up in German uniforms. And it wasn't long, boy, you could buy all the blank ammunition you could ever imagine in the 1960s. So it wasn't long until there was a skirmish. And then it just kind of took off. Now, I've been involved in it now for, I think I started in 78. So, 88, 98, 2008, 2018. I've been doing it for 40 years or better. And typically portray a senior NCO of late in an armor unit. So, following that venue along with knives, let's talk about some of the knives that I carry in reenacting and some of the knives that would have been in use in World War II. And let's start out with this one, a KBar. Now, this is not a KBar. This is a knockoff of a KBar, but it's turned out to be a pretty good knife. I've used it a lot as a knife instead of just as a display item. This knife is got a stack washer handle on it, just like it's supposed to be. It's got the right blade design to it, just like it's supposed to be. Cross guard looks pretty good. It's completely unmarked, but I believe this knife was originally marked Militech. So it's made in probably Taiwan or maybe even China. So it was black at one time, and the black started to rub off of it, and going in and out of the scabbard and so forth. And I've used this thing for everything in the world. I mean, we've done everything in this thing in the field from, carve your initials in that old railroad bridge to cut up bologna. Just kind of nice to have a knife. Now, the KBar knife historically was not a standard issue item for the U.S. Army in Europe. But soldiers were allowed to buy this knife through the exchange system, after about late 1942. They were trying to sell all of them they could, so, a soldier could buy a KBar style knife. And the Navy adopted it as well, as the Mark II or Mark III. Anyway, the Navy adopted this, and of course, how did you get to Europe? Well, you got to Europe on a ship. What do sailors and soldiers love to do? Well, they love to trade. So it's very easy to imagine that a U.S. Army trooper, would be in Europe with a KBar. If you buy a new KBar today, it's embossed with the KBar logo on the scabbard. Or if you buy a new KBar today or a new Camulus today, it comes in a black scabbard. They just didn't use black. They didn't dye boots black. They didn't make leather gear black. during World War II because the gravure necessary to produce the black dye was needed elsewhere. Okay? So all of the U.S. military stuff that you see that is leather in World War II is going to be brown. So, I bought this guy and I had to hunt high and low, but I actually found these things. Sarco had these scabbards, and I bought me 2 or 3 of them, and they're 11-ounce leather in brown with the rivets and so forth in the right place. I have a real KBar, a World War II issue one. But I'm not taking it to the field. No way. Now, if you had a real World War II one, how would you know it was a real World War II one? Well, what you were going to look for is this pin. This pin that's drilled through here, through one side, and through the tang, through the tang, and that's it. That's how the pommel is held on. If I can get a flashlight out here and get us a little bit more light on this subject. Okay? See that tang, the way it's recessed in there? That ain't World War II. The tang would protrude from there and then be peened on. And there wouldn't be any pin on the side of it. Okay? So this is obviously not an original World War II KBar. It's not even a KBar brand, okay? But it's a good facsimile of it. A real World War II KBar today, the original Scabbard is, after 80 years, is just no good. It's just gone away. So that's the KBar. I'll carry that on one set of gear that I have. Another knife that they had was this guy. The M3 fighting knife in the M8 scabbard, okay? This scabbard is an M8A1 scabbard. It has a metal tip down here on the end of it. An M8 scabbard doesn't have a metal tip on the end of it, okay? So this is like a Korea, okay, a 1950s version. Now, the simple reason why I carry this is for safety. I've had a lot of people comment on it in the field that it's not the correct scabbard for the M3 for World War II, and it's not. But it has this metal tip on here, so if I'm sitting in a Jeep, it doesn't break the end out of the scabbard and stick me in the rear end. So I'll just have to be Farby there. What's Farby, you say? Farby is a term that started in Revolutionary War reenacting. It's far be it from the real thing, or just Farby for short. This M3 trench knife is I don't know, I guess you'd call it a replica or a continuation. It's guard marked US M3, and it is Toronto cutlery, and it doesn't have the peened in. It does have the ordnance bomb, looks pretty nice, and it's got the cross pin pommel on it. But it's real leather, stacked handle, in every way made like an M3 trench knife. And you say, well, who would carry the M3 trench knife? People who did not have a bayonet would carry the M3 trench knife. The trench knife would be issued to people who were armed with weapons that did not have a bayonet lock. Okay? So, guys with carbines, officers, senior NCOs, guys with Thompsons, guys with grease guns, assigned bazooka bearers, okay, who would have a 45 and this, and be carrying the M1 or M9 bazooka all the time. Some artillery crewmen and so forth. They had a standard, everybody had to have a knife or a bayonet, okay? So these were issued to paratroopers whether or not they had an M1 rifle and a bayonet. They were issued to a lot of different people, you know, but typically the issue of the trench knife would be to a soldier who did not have a bayonet lug or a bayonet for his rifle. Okay. It's interesting to note that the M3 trench knife design, the blade design, is still with us today. It was the blade for the M4 bayonet, which fits the 30 caliber carbine. Now, in World War II, carbine didn't have bayonet lug on it. Okay. In Korea, the M1s and M2s had bayonet lugs on them, and they had a bayonet that was designed like this. I don't have one. I don't have an M2 carbine. Okay. And then this blade became the blade design of the M4 for carbine. It became the blade design for M5 bayonet, which was the bayonet that was made for the M1 rifle during and after the Korean conflict. Okay. It became the M6 bayonet blade, which is the bayonet for the M14 rifle. And it became the M7 bayonet blade, which was the bayonet for the M16. So this blade design is still with us today after 80 years. Okay. Now they also manufactured the first M16s didn't have bayonets on them. Okay, the first production M16s didn't have bayonet lugs on them. So they had a knife similar to the design of this called the trench knife M10. Okay, it was just like an M7 bayonet, except it didn't have the quilling on the top of it to mount it on the M16, and it didn't have the workings in the pommel to mount it on the gun, mount it on the rifle. It was the M10. I had one of them a few years ago, and I let a collector have it, and I kind of wish I had it now. But there you go, M3 trench knife. I'm going to show you a kind of a rare knife, something that I've managed to hang on to all these years. This is the Navy's folding survival knife. Okay. This is the pilot's folding survival knife. It's a big pocket knife. Now these were manufactured by, this one was manufactured by Colonial. They were also manufactured by Case, Cattaraugus, and maybe a couple of other manufacturers. I can't think of them all. This is a liner lock, extremely large pocket knife, okay, with a liner lock blade. And these were issued in naval survival kits, to individual pilots to carry on their person as well. And but mostly you found these in the survival kits, in the seat pack survival kit for a naval aviator. The interesting thing about this knife, not only you have this incredibly big, chunky, bulky, thick blade on this knife, you also have a hacksaw. There it is. You also have a hacksaw. And it is, I'm not 100% sure if this knife was intended to be used as a saw out in the field, or if this hack blade was intended for you to use to escape from a crumpled up airplane. Okay. But it is a push to cut, and by being a push to cut blade, it created a situation where you see a lot of these blades broken. You seldom ever see one of these knives with the hacksaw blade intact. That's probably what makes this knife rare, is the hacksaw blade is intact. But it's a big old chunky heavy folding knife, and it's fairly rigid. I mean, you know, and it's liner locks. You got to push that liner lock over and get it to shut. Comes with this pouch. I don't know if this pouch is original or not. It looks awfully new to be World War II, but you know, it may have been in storage in a survival kit for many years and just never unwrapped. I got a lot of comments over the last night video about why would you have so many TL29s? Well, first of all, TL29 is a good pocket knife. Second of all, original TL29s are getting extremely hard to get. You know, you just don't find them. As you know, they're kind of, the general public thinks they're a disposable knife and of no real consequence, no historical value, or so forth. One of the things I carry on my gear is one of these. If I can get it here. Lymans Tool Set. And I carry this on my equipment because a Gerber multi-tool or a Leatherman is not correct. Especially at these public events, you know, where everything has to be just exactly perfect. You know, you couldn't pull out a Leatherman tool and go to flashing it around. You know, you'd be out of historical context. But this is in. So what the Lymans Tool Set is, and you can still buy these Scabbards. Klein Tools still markets them. Just exactly like this. As a matter of fact, I think this is a Klein. Okay? So what you have is a Lymans Tool Set that has a TL29 electrician's pocket knife and a set of some kind of wire pliers, diagonal cutters, so forth. And this has got, you know, a shear cutter on it on the sides here. And then it's got, you know, a pinch cutter up here, and then an open area for pliers, you know. And this is an original, these were manufactured by Utica Cutlery, okay, which was a contractor in World War II. And, you know, it's a Lymans Tool Set. So you've got some tools on you that are both useful and historically correct. Well, that's gone on 18 minutes, really. We've been talking about this for 18 minutes. Anyway, you see one of these guys around, they're pretty cool. Well, that's about the size of a little primer on World War II pocket knives and sheath knives. Like a tape, share a pie, commentate, and subscribe. Leave me a $1 in a Patreon bucket on the way out the door, and, you know, we keep right on making content for you. God bless everybody, and we'll see you when we see you.